The flight attendant's voice rose loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm going to ask you one last time. Move to the back of the plane or I will call security." Her words carried a sharp edge, her tone dripping with condescension. Ava Carter, the black woman, calm as ever, looked up at her. "I've already told you. I'm not moving," she said simply. Her tone was even, almost soothing, but it held an undeniable strength. She was humiliated in front of everyone, but no one expected what would happen next when the woman they thought was powerless stood up and revealed who she really was. As we delve into the story, if you believe everyone should be treated with respect, no matter their color, click the subscribe button now and tell us where you are watching from. The plane gleamed under the afternoon sun, its sleek design promising a luxurious journey for its passengers. Inside, the cabin was nothing short of opulence. Plush leather seats, gold accents, and an air of exclusivity that made everyone inside feel like royalty. Passengers moved with ease, their expensive luggage rolling behind them as they were ushered toward the sleek private jet waiting on the tarmac. Soon they settled into their spots, some scrolling through their devices, others sipping champagne offered by the attentive flight crew. Inside the plane, soft ambient music played in the background. Among them was Ava Carter, a calm and composed woman in her late 30s, dressed in a tailored navy blazer and matching slacks. Ava exuded understated elegance. She moved with quiet confidence, though she made no effort to draw attention to herself. Ava Carter stepped into the cabin, her calm presence drawing attention. Her steps were measured, and her gaze swept the cabin briefly before she moved toward her seat. Her destination wasn't just another trip. It was a journey to oversee her growing empire. Though no one on board yet knew who she was, she preferred it that way, for now. Sophia Lewis, the lead flight attendant, stands near the entrance. Her crisp uniform is perfectly tailored, her sharp features exuding control. She greets the passengers one by one, her smile warm for some, colder for others. She prides herself on keeping order on the plane, though her idea of order often depends on how people look or behave. Sophia's welcoming tone shifts subtly as she greets Ava with a curt "welcome aboard." The warmth is noticeably absent. Behind Ava, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond sat. The couple, in their 60s, exuded the ease of seasoned travelers. Mrs. Raymond clutched a small knitting bag, her fingers already twitching to begin her work. Mr. Raymond carried a folded newspaper, his expression one of mild curiosity as he took in the scene. Sophia's smile brightened for them. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond. Lovely to have you with us again." Ava glanced over her shoulder, noticing the stark contrast in Sophia's tone. Her expression remains calm, though her eyes reflect an awareness of the unspoken dynamics at play. As other passengers settle, Sophia moves through the cabin, ensuring everything is in place. She checks on the Raymond couple, offering them a bright smile. "Is there anything I can get for you before we take off?" Mrs. Raymond shakes her head politely, already absorbed in her knitting. Mr. Raymond nods toward his coffee, indicating he's satisfied. When Sophia passes Ava, her demeanor shifts again. She glances at Ava's bag resting neatly under the seat, and her lips press into a thin line. She doesn't offer the same courtesy or warmth, simply walking by without a word. Sophia Lewis, in her early 40s, carried herself with the precision of someone who thrived on control. Her pristine uniform and perfectly coiffed hair matched her sharp demeanor. To Sophia, appearances mattered more than anything else, and her judgments were swift and unapologetic. Sophia's eyes narrowed as she watched Ava settle in. Something about Ava didn't sit right with her. Not her clothes, not her calm self-assurance, and certainly not the fact that she didn't immediately seek attention like many of the passengers Sophia deemed worthy of respect. Ava simply didn't belong. She approached Ava with quick, purposeful strides, her lips curling into a tight smile. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her tone polite but dripping with condescension. "I think you're in the wrong section." Ava glanced up at her, her expression calm. "I believe this is my seat," she replied, her voice steady. Sophia's smile didn't waver, but her tone sharpened. "I don't think so. This section is reserved for our elite passengers." Nearby, other passengers began to notice the exchange. A nosy socialite sitting nearby leaned slightly to get a better view, her curiosity piqued. A friendly businessman across the aisle glanced over, frowning slightly at Sophia's tone. Ava remained composed, her gaze steady as she replied, "You might want to double-check your passenger list before making assumptions." Sophia's eyebrows arched, her irritation barely hidden. "I don't need to check anything," she said sharply. "I know who belongs here and who doesn't." The tension in the cabin thickened. Passengers exchanged glances, whispering quietly to each other. Others, uncomfortable, pretended not to notice. One passenger muttered, "Why doesn't she just move if she's in the wrong seat?" Another shrugged, "She's probably trying to sneak in for a free upgrade." Sophia crossed her arms, standing her ground. "If you don't move to the back of the plane," she said, her voice loud enough for others to hear, "I'll have to call security." Ava tilted her head slightly, her calm expression unwavering. "Call whoever you need to," she said, "but I'm not moving." The nosy socialite gasped softly. The businessman leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Sophia, now visibly frustrated, turned to the junior flight attendant Grace, who stood nearby watching nervously. "Grace," Sophia snapped, "escort her to the back now." Grace hesitated, glancing between Ava and Sophia. She wanted to speak up, to say something about checking the passenger list as Ava had suggested, but Sophia's sharp glare froze her in place. Reluctantly, she nodded and stepped forward. Ava shifted slightly in her seat, her calm demeanor still intact. "You might want to think carefully about what you're doing," she said softly, her words carrying more weight than Sophia realized. Sophia scoffed, waving off the warning. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she said. "Now get up." What would you do if someone treated you like this on a flight? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you're loving this story so far, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories like this. Sophia's tone grew sharper as she gestured toward the back of the plane. "You're not supposed to be here," she said again, her voice now tinged with impatience. The passengers watched in stunned silence. The tension crackled in the air like static. Ava leaned back slightly, her gaze steady on Sophia. "You shouldn't make assumptions about people," she said quietly. Sophia's smirk widened. "And you shouldn't be in seats you didn't pay for." The cliffhanger came as Ava finally picked up her phone, her calm expression unchanging. She typed something quickly, then set it back down on the armrest. "You're making a mistake," she said simply, her words hanging in the air. Sophia didn't listen. "We'll see about that," she muttered, gesturing again for Grace to act. The junior attendant stepped closer, her hesitation palpable as the scene continued to unfold. Sophia's irritation only grew as Ava remained seated, her quiet confidence a stark contrast to Sophia's increasingly flustered demeanor. The tension in the cabin thickened with every passing moment, drawing the attention of nearby passengers who watched the exchange with curiosity and disbelief. Sophia's voice rose loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm going to ask you one last time, move to the back of the plane or I will call security." Her words carried a sharp edge, her tone dripping with condescension. Ava, calm as ever, looked up at Sophia. "I've already told you. I'm not moving," she said simply. Her tone was even, almost soothing, but it held an undeniable strength that only infuriated Sophia further. A woman ahead, a nosy socialite with perfectly coiffed hair and an air of entitlement, leaned toward her companion. She whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "Looks like she's trying to sneak in for a free ride." Sophia seized on the comment, her smirk returning. "That's exactly what it looks like," she said, folding her arms and turning to the other passengers as though rallying support. "We have rules for a reason. Some people just don't respect them." Ava didn't respond to the insults or the growing murmurs around her. Instead, she kept her gaze steady on Sophia, her composure of quiet defiance that spoke louder than any words. Grace hesitated, then took a step toward the passenger list clipped near the cockpit door. Her fingers trembled as she scanned the names, hoping to find something that would help Ava. but before she could say anything, Sophia snapped, "Grace, what are you doing?" Emily turned, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just checking." "I've got this under control," Sophia interrupted, her tone sharp. "You don't need to get involved." Emily stepped back, her face flushing with embarrassment. She bit her lip, torn between doing what she knew was right and the fear of losing her job. As the tension built, a kind-looking man seated across the aisle leaned forward. The businessman, dressed in a crisp suit and exuding a calm demeanor, smiled at Ava. "Excuse me," he said gently, "is everything all right?" Ava turned to him, her expression softening. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied, her voice steady but grateful for the small act of kindness. Before the businessman could say more, Sophia interjected, her tone accusing. "Sir, I'd appreciate it if you didn't encourage the disturbance." She turned back to Ava, pointing a finger at her. "You're causing a scene." The businessman frowned. "From where I'm sitting," he said calmly, "you're the one making a scene." Sophia's face flushed with anger, and she turned her attention back to Ava. "I've had enough of this," she snapped. "Either you move, or I'll make sure you're escorted off this plane." Ava met her gaze without flinching. "You can try," she said softly. Sophia's frustration boiled over. Her voice shook as she leaned closer to Ava. "Why don't you just admit you're in the wrong seat and stop wasting everyone's time?" Ava remained silent, her calmness only fueling Sophia's anger. Sophia finally left Ava alone and turned to carry out her other duties. Angrily, Sophia moved briskly down the aisle, her polished shoes clicking softly on the carpet. She carried a tray of sparkling water, her demeanor professional but her expression tight with irritation. Ava sat quietly in her seat, her attention focused on the book in her hands. Passengers chatted softly, the atmosphere calm, until Sophia's subtle hostility began to surface. Ava had been waiting patiently for a drink, watching as Sophia served Mr. and Mrs. Raymond first, then moved to others in the back. Sophia, however, made no effort to acknowledge Ava. The tray was nearly empty when Ava finally spoke, her tone gentle. "Excuse me, could I have some water, please?" Sophia paused, glancing at Ava with a dismissive look. "I'll get to you when I can," she said curtly, walking past without another word. Ava's calm gaze followed Sophia's retreating figure, but she remained silent. "What would you do if you noticed this kind of behavior?" Ava asked. "Would you step in or stay quiet? Let us know in the comments below." Minutes passed, and Ava shifted in her seat, trying to find a more comfortable position. She stretched one leg slightly into the aisle, her movement unassuming. Sophia returned, tray in hand. Her sharp eyes caught the small adjustment. Instead of asking Ava to move her leg, Sophia deliberately changed her path. In an instant, Sophia's foot struck Ava's leg. The tray tilted and the glasses of water tumbled forward, splashing onto Ava's lap and the floor. Sophia gasped theatrically, her voice sharp and loud. "Watch where you're putting your legs! You've caused a mess!" Passengers turned their heads, startled by the commotion. Ava looked up, startled but composed, her hands brushing at the water on her trousers. She said calmly, "But you walked into my leg." Ava tilted her head slightly, her calm gaze unwavering. "I've only asked to be treated with the same respect as everyone else," she replied. "And if that's too much to ask, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." The words hung in the air, a quiet yet powerful rebuke. Sophia's face flushed with anger. She stepped closer, her frustration boiling over. "You think you can talk to me like that?" she hissed, her voice sharp. And then, in a shocking moment, unable to contain herself, Sophia raised her hand and slapped Ava across the face. The sound echoed through the cabin, sharp and shocking like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the passengers. The businessman stood halfway, his face a mix of disbelief and anger. Emily's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Even the nosy socialite appeared taken aback, her previous smirk replaced by a look of unease. Ava slowly straightened, her hand resting calmly on her lap. Her expression remained composed, her gaze steady as she looked up at Sophia. The cabin was silent. The tension was palpable. Ava Carter now straightened in her seat. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes carried a weight that made Sophia Lewis hesitate for the first time. "You just made the worst mistake of your life," Ava said quietly, her voice calm but cutting through the air like a knife. What would you do if you were in Ava's shoes? Let us know in the comments below, and if this story has you hooked, hit like and subscribe now. Ava looked up at Sophia, her voice steady and composed. "I've been patient with you, but your behavior has crossed the line," she said, her words deliberate and firm. Sophia's expression darkened, her jaw tightened, and her hands clenched at her sides. "Crossed the line?" she snapped, her voice rising. "You're the one who's been disruptive since you got on this plane." Ava didn't flinch. She didn't touch her face or respond in kind. Instead, she slowly straightened her posture, her gaze fixed firmly on Sophia, her calm demeanor remaining intact even in the face of such blatant aggression. "You'll regret that," Ava said softly, her voice carrying a quiet authority that seemed to fill the entire cabin. Sophia faltered for a moment, her confidence shaken by Ava's unyielding composure, but she quickly recovered, scoffing loudly. "Regret it?" she sneered. "What are you going to do, call the police?" Ava didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes. The passengers could feel the shift in power. From the corner of the cabin, Emily, the younger flight attendant, watched the scene unfold with a mixture of horror and determination. She had been quietly observing Sophia's behavior all day, her discomfort growing with every passing moment. Now, she knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. Discreetly, Emily stepped away from the commotion and pulled out her phone. She dialed a number quickly, her fingers trembling slightly. When the call connected, her voice was hushed but firm. "It's Emily," she said. "We have a situation on the plane." Emily returned to her post, her face a mix of worry and determination. Sophia, oblivious to the call, stood with her arms crossed, her anger simmering but her authority waning. Ava remained seated, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to Sophia's rage. Passengers continued to watch, their eyes darting between Ava and Sophia, unsure of what would happen next. One of them leaned toward Ava, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" she asked, her concern genuine. Ava turned to her, offering a small, reassuring smile. "I'm fine," she said softly. The tension in the cabin was palpable, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the plane's engines. It was clear that the situation was far from over. Ava remained seated, her posture steady despite the water dripping onto her clothing. She looked at Sophia, her voice calm but firm. "All you had to do was treat me with respect, but you failed because of your prejudice, thinking I don't belong here just because you feel so." Sophia's irritation deepened. Her grip on the tray tightened as she leaned closer, her tone mocking. "Respect? Maybe you should earn it first. People like you don't deserve my respect." The tension in the cabin was palpable. Passengers exchanged glances, some shifting in their seats, unsure of how to react. The unspoken question lingered in the air. How far would this go? At this point, Ava's anger rose. "You shouldn't have said that," Ava said, her voice sharp but firm. Her words carried an unspoken weight, leaving everyone in the cabin wondering what would happen next. Sophia folded her arms, her anger still simmering. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "I've been more than patient with you. Maybe now you'll understand that actions have consequences." Ava's eyes narrowed slightly, her calm demeanor still unbroken. "You're right," she said softly, her words deliberate. "Actions do have consequences. And you're about to find out just how true that is." For a moment, Sophia faltered. Something in Ava's tone sent a chill down her spine, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. "I'm not afraid of your empty threats," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "You're the one who'll regret this, not me." Sophia turned away, feigning confidence, but deep inside, unease began to creep in. She had crossed a line, and though she wouldn't admit it, she knew it. The looks from the passengers, the horrified expression on Emily's face, and Ava's quiet composure, the tension was palpable. Ava Carter now straightened in her seat. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes carried a weight that made Sophia Lewis hesitate for the first time. "You just made the worst mistake of your life," Ava said quietly, her voice calm but cutting through the air like a knife. What would you do if you were in Ava's shoes? Let us know in the comments below, and if this story has you hooked, hit like and subscribe now. Ava looked up at Sophia, her voice steady and composed. "I've been patient with you, but your behavior has crossed the line," she said, her words deliberate and firm. Sophia's expression darkened, her jaw tightened, and her hands clenched at her sides. "Cross the line?" she snapped, her voice rising. "You're the one who's been disruptive since you got on this plane." Ava didn't flinch. She didn't touch her face or respond in kind. Instead, she slowly straightened her posture, her gaze fixed firmly on Sophia. Her calm demeanor remained intact, even in the face of such blatant aggression. "You'll regret that," Ava said softly, her voice carrying a quiet authority that seemed to fill the entire cabin. Sophia faltered for a moment, her confidence shaken by Ava's unyielding composure, but she quickly recovered, scoffing loudly. "Regret it?" she sneered. "What are you going to do, call the police?" Ava didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes, and the passengers could feel the shift in power. From the corner of the cabin, Emily, the younger flight attendant, watched the scene unfold with a mixture of horror and determination. She had been quietly observing Sophia's behavior all day, her discomfort growing with every passing moment. Now she knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. Discreetly, Emily stepped away from the commotion and pulled out her phone. She dialed a number quickly, her fingers trembling slightly. When the call connected, her voice was hushed, but firm. "It's Emily," she said. "We have a situation on the plane." Emily returned to her post, her face a mix of worry and determination. Sophia, oblivious to the call, stood with her arms crossed, her anger simmering but her authority waning. Ava remained seated, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to Sophia's rage. Passengers continued to watch, their eyes darting between Ava and Sophia, unsure of what would happen next. One of them leaned toward Ava, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" she asked, her concern genuine. Ava turned to her, offering a small, reassuring smile. "I'm fine," she said softly. The tension in the cabin was palpable. The silence was broken only by the faint hum of the plane's engine. It was clear that the situation was far from over. Ava remained seated, her posture steady despite the water dripping onto her clothing. She looked at Sophia, her voice calm but firm. "All you had to do was treat me with respect," she said, "but you failed because of your prejudice, thinking I don't belong here just because you feel so." Sophia's irritation deepened. Her grip on the tray tightened as she leaned closer, her tone mocking. "Respect? Maybe you should earn it first. People like you don't deserve my respect." The tension in the cabin was palpable. Passengers exchanged glances, some shifting in their seats, unsure of how to react. The unspoken question lingered in the air. How far would this go? At this point, Ava's anger rose. "You shouldn't have said that," she said, her voice sharp but firm. Her words carried an unspoken weight, leaving everyone in the cabin wondering what would happen next. Sophia folded her arms, her anger still simmering. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "I've been more than patient with you. Maybe now you'll understand that actions have consequences." Ava's eyes narrowed slightly, her calm demeanor still unbroken. "You're right," she said softly, her words deliberate. "Actions do have consequences, and you're about to find out just how true that is." For a moment, Sophia faltered. Something in Ava's tone sent a chill down her spine, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. "I'm not afraid of your empty threats," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "You're the one who'll regret this, not me." Sophia turned away, feigning confidence, but deep inside, unease began to creep in. She had crossed a line, and though she wouldn't admit it, she knew it. The looks from the passengers, the horrified expression on Emily's face, and Ava's quiet composure were all making her second-guess herself. "Excuse me," she said, crossing her arms. "Why would I need to step aside? I'm handling this." The pilot's gaze flicked to Ava Carter, then back to Sophia Lewis. "I just received a call from the management that the owner of the plane is on board, and she's Miss Carter here," he said plainly, his words hitting the room like a thunderclap. The cabin erupted into gasps and murmurs. The nosy socialite audibly inhaled, her eyes widening as she looked back and forth between Ava and Sophia. "She owns the plane?" she whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief. The businessman nodded knowingly, his expression calm. "I had a feeling," he muttered under his breath, as though the revelation confirmed what he had suspected all along. Emily, standing near the galley, froze in place. Relief washed over her face as the realization hit her. Ava wasn't just another passenger, she was someone far more powerful than anyone had realized. Sophia, meanwhile, stared at the pilot, her face turning an alarming shade of red. "That can't be true," she stammered, her voice losing its usual sharpness. "There must be some mistake." The tension on the plane was palpable. The silence was only broken by the hum of the engines. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, the memory of the slap still fresh in their minds. Sophia stood near the aisle, her arms crossed, her defiance evident despite the growing discomfort around her. Ava remained seated, calm and composed, her posture as poised as ever. Then, without warning, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an unscheduled landing. Please remain seated and prepare for descent." Passengers murmured in confusion. The businessman leaned toward Ava, whispering, "What's happening? Why are we landing?" Ava didn't answer, her expression serene but unreadable. She simply looked out the window. Sophia's brow furrowed, her confidence faltering as she glanced nervously toward the front of the cabin. The plane touched down smoothly, and moments later a sleek black SUV pulled up directly to the tarmac. The doors opened and two sharply dressed assistants stepped out. Their movements brisk and purposeful, they ascended the plane's steps with quiet authority, their presence commanding attention. The moment they entered the cabin, one of them said warmly, "Miss Carter, everything is ready for your review." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Sophia froze, her face draining of color as the realization hit her like a wave. "Miss Carter?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The assistants ignored her, their focus entirely on Ava. "Do you need anything before we proceed?" one of them asked, their tone deferential. Ava stood slowly, her movements graceful and deliberate. She adjusted her blazer, her calm demeanor radiating power. The passengers watched in stunned silence as Ava finally spoke, her voice steady and commanding. "I'm Ava Carter," she began, her gaze sweeping across the cabin. "I'm the owner of this plane, and I'm also the owner of this airline." Sophia's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The confident, condescending flight attendant was now a pale shadow of herself, her earlier bravado replaced by sheer panic. Ava turned her attention to Sophia, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Sophia, your behavior today has been nothing short of disgraceful," she said, her words cutting through the silence. "You've humiliated yourself, mistreated a passenger, and tarnished the reputation of this airline." Sophia stammered, her voice trembling. I didn't know." Ava held up a hand, silencing her. "You didn't know, because you didn't bother to treat me with the respect that every passenger deserves," she said firmly. "Instead, you made assumptions, you acted with prejudice, and you escalated a situation that could have been handled with basic decency." The passengers nodded in agreement, their earlier silence giving way to murmurs of support, their faces glowing with admiration. Mr. Raymond folded his newspaper neatly, giving Ava an approving nod. Ava finally stood, her movements deliberate and controlled. She straightened her blazer and looked directly at Sophia. Her gaze was calm but commanding. "There's no mistake in your actions, Sophia," she said, her tone quiet, yet it carried an authority that silenced the entire cabin. Sophia's eyes darted around the room, searching for someone to back her up, but no one came to her defense. The passengers watched silently, some with their phones discreetly raised, recording every moment. Ava took a step closer to Sophia, her voice steady. "While you were busy judging me," she began, "you failed to do your job. Your job is to treat every passenger with respect, no matter who they are or what you assume about them. And now there are consequences." Sophia's hands clenched at her sides, her mind racing. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. She could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, and for the first time, her confidence faltered completely. Ava gestured to the pilot. "I want this addressed immediately," she said, "and I want to ensure that this doesn't happen again to anyone." The pilot nodded, his demeanor professional. "Understood, Miss Carter," he said. Sophia took a step back, her mind swirling with panic. She looked toward the exit, her instincts screaming at her to leave before things got worse. But before she could make a move, the pilot stepped in her path, his expression firm. "You're not going anywhere," he said. Ava's gaze didn't waver. "Sophia, your actions today have proven that you are unfit for this position. Effective immediately, you are fired." The words hung in the air like a final verdict. Sophia's face crumpled, and she took a step back, her confidence completely shattered. "Please, Miss Carter," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean—" Ava's expression hardened. "You didn't mean to get caught," she said coldly, "but you did, and now you'll face the consequences." At that moment, 2 uniformed police officers boarded the plane, their presence causing a wave of murmurs among the passengers. Sophia's face turned ashen as they approached. "Miss Carter," one of the officers said respectfully, "we received your report. Are you pressing charges?" Ava's gaze didn't waver. "Yes," she said firmly. "This individual assaulted me in front of multiple witnesses. I expect her to be held accountable." Sophia gasped, taking a step back. "Wait, this is a misunderstanding," she cried, her voice desperate. "I didn't mean to—" The officer stepped forward, one producing a pair of handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault," the officer said. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Sophia's breathing quickened as she realized there was no way out. Her gaze flicked to Ava, who stood calm and composed, her presence a stark contrast to Sophia's unraveling demeanor. Trouble had arrived, and Sophia knew she couldn't escape it. This was only the beginning of her reckoning. Passengers watched in stunned silence as Sophia's hands were cuffed behind her back. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to protest. "Please, Miss Carter." "I'm sorry," she sobbed. Ava's expression remained impassive. "Your apology means nothing without accountability," she said quietly. "You made your choices, now you'll face the consequences." The passengers watched silently, their eyes fixed on Sophia as she disappeared down the aisle. The once dominant flight attendant was now a defeated figure, her arrogance replaced by regret and humiliation. Ava turned back to the cabin, her voice steady as she addressed the passengers. "I apologize for what you had to witness today. This is not the standard of service I expect on my planes. Moving forward, we will ensure that every passenger is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." The cabin erupted into applause, clapping enthusiastically. Mr. Raymond gave a small cheer while Mrs. Raymond set her knitting aside to clap politely. Ava turned to Grace, the younger flight attendant who had quietly supported her throughout the ordeal. "Grace," Ava said, her tone softening, "I noticed your professionalism today. Thank you for stepping up when it mattered. You'll be hearing from my office about a promotion." Grace's eyes widened and she nodded quickly, her face lighting up with gratitude. "Thank you, Miss Carter," she said softly. Ava smiled briefly before stepping toward the exit, her assistant following closely behind. The plane's atmosphere had shifted completely. The earlier tension was replaced by admiration and relief. Justice had been served, and Ava had set an example that no one on that flight would forget. Do you think Sophia deserves forgiveness, or should she face the consequences of her actions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Passengers smiled at the interaction, the warmth of the moment spreading through the cabin. The nosy woman who had watched the entire ordeal with wide-eyed fascination leaned forward in her seat. "Miss Carter, you're amazing," she blurted out, her admiration shining brightly. Ava turned toward her, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "Thank you," she replied. "Remember this moment. It's always worth standing up for what's right." As Ava stepped off the plane, the fresh air of the tarmac greeted her. The black SUV waited patiently, its driver holding the door open. Her assistants walked beside her, briefing her on her next meeting, but Ava's thoughts lingered on the events of the day. Later, in a televised interview, Ava sat in a sleek studio, her demeanor as poised as ever. The interviewer leaned forward, clearly captivated. "Miss Carter, your story has gone viral. Millions of people have seen how you handled this situation. What message do you want to send?" Ava's gaze was steady as she answered, her voice clear and resolute. "Respect is a right, not a privilege," she said. "Everyone deserves dignity, no matter how they look, where they come from, or what others assume about them. True leadership is about setting that standard and ensuring it's upheld." The interviewer nodded, visibly moved. "And what would you say to those who faced similar challenges but don't have the platform you do, Miss Carter?" Ava's expression softened. "I'd say that strength comes from within. Even when you feel invisible, remember your worth. You don't need a title or wealth to demand respect. You just need to stand firm in who you are." A few weeks later, Ava boarded another flight, this time greeted by a different crew. The energy was warm, welcoming, and professional. The lead flight attendant greeted her with a genuine smile. "Welcome aboard, Miss Carter. It's an honor to have you." Ava returned the smile as she settled into her seat. The atmosphere felt lighter, the service impeccable, but more importantly, it was filled with respect. As she gazed out the window, watching the runway blur into the sky, a sense of peace washed over her. The events of that day had left a lasting impact, not just on the passengers and crew who had witnessed, but on everyone who had seen the story unfold. Ava knew that her actions had turned an injustice into a lesson, one that would ripple far beyond that single flight. She smiled, knowing that sometimes the most powerful victories weren't about winning, they were about inspiring change. As the passengers settled into their seats, Ava quietly reached for her phone. In the aftermath of what had unfolded, she knew this wasn't just about her. It was about changing a system that allowed prejudice and assumptions to thrive. As the jet climbed higher into the clouds, Ava settled into her seat at the front of the plane. The window beside her framed a breathtaking view of the horizon, the world below fading into a sea of blue and white. She gazed out at the endless sky, a sense of peace washing over her. This wasn't just about confronting prejudice or asserting her authority. It was about turning a moment of humiliation into a powerful lesson, one that would ripple far beyond this single flight. Ava smiled to herself, her reflection faintly visible in the window. She knew this was just the beginning. With every decision, every policy, and every act of leadership, she was shaping a future where respect and kindness were the standard, not the exception. The plane soared higher, the engines humming softly as it moved toward its destination. And Ava, seated at the helm of her vision, felt a quiet triumph that no turbulence could ever shake. In a public statement released shortly after the flight, Ava spoke directly to the world. Her words carried a message that resonated far beyond the confines of the jet. "Luxury isn't about appearances," she said in a heartfelt video that quickly went viral. "It's about the experience we create for everyone. True success is measured not by what you can afford, but by how you treat others." This is why I'm implementing new policies across my airline to ensure that every passenger, no matter who they are, feels valued and respected. The statement sparked conversations across social media, with people applauding Ava's leadership and her commitment to change. Hashtags like "respect above all" and "Ava's vision" trended for days, inspiring others to reflect on their own behavior and biases. If you love the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share with the people around you.